Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Beyond Integration, a Unified IRT and eCOA Platform. My name is Edward, and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 40 to 45 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved, so please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to those questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for future streaming on xtalks.com. A big thanks to Y-Prime, who developed the content for today's webinar. Y-Prime offers more than a decade of focused work with eClinical systems to expedite and improve the quality of patient management, clinical supplies, drug accountability, and clinical data. Cloud-based interactive response technology and electronic clinical outcome assessment platforms offer sponsors greater speed, precision, and integration in clinical trial management. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. Jamie Cook is the Vice President of Technical Delivery. In this role, Jamie leads Y-Prime's team of project developers and configuration specialists who build and deliver IRT, eCOA, and unified systems. Jamie brings extensive knowledge of clinical systems, cloud-based technology, and programming languages. As a co-founder of Y-Prime, he has held a number of leadership roles where he shaped the company's business consulting and customer care functions. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand the mic over to Jamie Cook for today's presentation. Jamie, you may begin when you are ready.
Thanks, Edward. Can you see my screen?
I can. It looks clear on our end, Jamie.
Great, thank you. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As Edward mentioned, my name is Jamie Cook. I'm one of the co-founders here at Y-Prime, and I currently oversee all of the developers and configuration specialists who deliver our IRT, eCOA, and unified systems. So today we're going to start by talking about eClinical systems and data integrations. In particular, we'll focus on IRT and eCOA. Then we'll talk about what happens when integrations become challenging. We'll look at some of the differences between unification and integration, and we'll look at some use cases for when unification may be a good idea, and then we'll wrap it up with some time allowed for any questions. I'd like to start off with a quick definition of what we mean when we say unification. It's kind of a new concept. Some of you may not have heard of it. A very simple definition that we'll use for today's purposes will be combining multiple functions into a single interface and database. And the systems that we'll use for most of today's discussions will be IRT, or Interactive Response Technology. You may refer to it as IBRS, and eCOA, or Electronic Clinical Outcomes Assessments, which includes ePro, or Electronic Patient Reported Outcomes. So I'd like to start off with a polling question. Edward, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, Jamie. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. We do have a poll question for the audience here today, and I'll go ahead and launch that on everyone's screen right now. Today's poll question asks, what do you believe is the biggest advantage of a unified platform? And the answer options for this poll question are reduced data entry overlap, cost savings, higher data quality, ability to see data in real time, or do you believe it's easier error remediation? Our audience can vote on this poll live right now in real time, so we do encourage everyone to vote. Again, this question asks, what do you believe is the biggest advantages of a unified platform? And these advantages being reduced data entry overlap, cost savings, higher data quality, ability to see data in real time, or do you believe the biggest advantage of a unified platform would be easier error remediation? I'll give the audience just a few more seconds here to cast their final votes. And it looks like most of you have voted on that poll. Thank you very much. I'll now go ahead and close that poll and share the results with our audience. So it looks like 50% of you voting reduced data entry overlap as the biggest advantage of a unified platform, 22% of you voting higher data quality, 11% of you voting ability to see data in real time, another 11% voting easier error remediation, and 6% voting cost savings as the biggest advantage of a unified platform. Very interesting results there. With that, I'll pass the mic back over to you, Jamie.
Those are very interesting results. I'm kind of surprised cost savings wasn't a little higher. But we'll talk about each of these advantages and how they can possibly be accomplished via unification. The average clinical trial has a dozen or more data capture systems, and this can present considerable integration and interoperability challenges and extends the life cycle or the cycle time for data management processes. Clinical trials rely on a number of individual and incompatible systems to collect various forms of clinical study data. And these systems support electronic data capture, or EDC, safety and adverse event reporting, IRT, as we mentioned, eCOA, clinical trial management systems, or CTMSs, clinical supply management, lab assessments. I can keep going on and on there. There's still a ton of studies running today with little or no integration. So these systems are sitting out there doing their own job in their own little world and not knowing what's happening in the other systems. These study teams are often manually typing the same data into multiple systems. I don't think I need to explain that this is inefficient, costly, and also full of risk. With some upfront planning and development, you can coordinate data transfers throughout your study, allowing for a two-way exchange of data between these systems. And this can save you time and money and allow your studies to operate more efficiently. So why do we need to integrate? First off, we want to avoid entering the same data more than once. We want to avoid wasting time and money on unnecessary tasks. We want to eliminate data or knowledge silos so that this data can be seen with more context. And we want to provide the ability to identify and notify based on this data. So these are all basic reasons why we should typically look to integrate our systems. So again, typing the same information into multiple systems is a waste of time and energy. It can annoy your study teams as well as your sites. Not to mention it's very error prone. One of the many jobs I performed at Y Prime over the years was to set up and run the customer care group. You might know it as the help desk, but we call it customer care here at Y Prime. They're the ones who answer the phone when users call the 1-800 number, and they respond to the emails asking for data corrections. So during my time overseeing customer care, the most common requests our support team received were for simple demographic changes such as initials and birth dates. We now have an automated data correction form in IRT and eCOA, which allows users to request and approve and make these changes themselves, but this was prior to that feature. And I saw firsthand that given the opportunity, humans will make mistakes. And these mistakes aren't always recognized immediately. So this could lead to two systems showing different data. Which one's correct? Which one did we include on the latest report we sent up for management? Was this data used correctly as eligibility criteria? It takes time to manually enter this data, and it usually needs to be done immediately, as you know. So when a screen subject receives their eCOA handheld device, the last thing they want to do is wait for someone to go in and manually set them up in the eCOA portal. And this portal is just one of a dozen URLs the site needs to remember for this study, one of which is the IRT system that they've already used to screen the patient in the first place. In addition, do you really want your high-priced employees or your expensive sites spending their time doing data entry when that data has already been previously entered? The good sites are valuable, so you also don't want them getting frustrated because they're entering the same information into multiple systems. And it's not just the redundant data that takes time either. How about when you want to see your data? So at Y Prime, our consulting group has helped many sponsors who would run reports out of multiple systems and then spend hours trying to merge and format these reports into something meaningful. These are usually high-priced medical experts being paid a couple $100 an hour sometimes, who are manipulating Excel spreadsheets for hours every week to get a view of their study. It's tedious work, and it often results in a report that's out of date by the time it's produced. So wouldn't you rather have these professionals spending their time focusing on running your study rather than manipulating Excel data? Most of these systems focus on data collection, but much of this data overlaps across systems. People and systems can become what we call silos of knowledge. So these silos can prevent people from seeing data in context and from really seeing the big picture. This can lead to partially informed decision making. Systems do not, or I should say should not, operate in a vacuum. So to gain a better perspective, data from one system should be combined with data from other systems to allow it to be viewed in context. And this visibility will allow you to make quicker, more informed, and therefore more accurate decisions. So far, all we've been talking about is how your system should not be isolated, and that integrating your systems can make your life better. And it's true that integrations are better than no integrations. Systems communicating and sharing data is better than systems not communicating and not sharing data. But integrations aren't perfect. Things go wrong, network tunnels go down, passwords expire, developers make mistakes, and sometimes even requirements aren't clearly defined. So these dozen plus systems we've now decided to integrate need to be monitored. And we need to ensure that the data is moving as expected between our systems. As the volume increases, there's more chances of errors. A bad patient integration attempt between IRT and EDC can cause a logjam of integration requests that need to be handled by IT folks. And these sometimes take days to resolve, which can lead to even further delays. Think of it like a traffic jam. Until the accident is cleared, the cars behind it just aren't getting through. So here's a slide with a bunch of numbers on it that paints a pretty scary picture. Hopefully this gives you an idea of the amount of data and errors we're potentially talking about here. So an average phase 3 clinical trial could generate about 120,000 records over a 2-year span. And let's assume we have a less than 0.05% error rate. So this typically means only about 1 to 10 records processed a week contain an error. And that doesn't sound too bad, right? But what if I told you that one error can take an analyst anywhere from 15 minutes to 8 hours to problem solve? They may need to query multiple systems. They might have to speak to several study team members, reach out to at least 1 or 2 vendors. So one study can potentially require 8 to 10 hours a week to manage. And at this rate, 4 studies could require an FTE just to oversee integrations between your clinical systems. I've personally seen some large companies with over 150,000 records in their error.
Hi there, Jamie. Apologies for the interruption. Can you still hear us on our end? Looks like your audio may have dropped there.
I can.
Oh, okay. That's much better. Excellent. Apologies for that. You sound great now.
Okay. Should I go back and repeat anything, or are we good?
No, it was just for 10 seconds there. So
Okay.
yeah, you can proceed as normal.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, I've seen some companies with pretty large error logs in the hundreds of thousands. And again, while they were integrating, they weren't necessarily doing it the most effective manner. But the takeaway is that these integrations do save time and money, but there's also some effort required. Back in 2010, we started building IRT systems at Y Prime, and at the exact same time, of course, we started building integrations for these IRT systems. And then we built the integrations again for the next study, and the next study, and the next study. And the majority of our IRT systems would integrate with an EDC system and a supply system. And typically for sponsor A, it would be the same integrations for study 1 that it was for study 2 and study 3. Sponsors don't switch their EDC systems often, so when we build a RAVE integration, it's likely to be needed for every other study as well. So we recognized pretty quickly that we were rewriting these integrations over and over again. We were usually able to be more efficient and cut and paste the code so that it wasn't always a complete rewrite from scratch, but in the end, they were still custom development each time. So we came up with an internal platform, which eventually became a product for us to integrate our systems with vendors. This platform allowed us to reuse rather than rewrite the same integrations for each new study, and integrations now became a configuration rather than a customization. So that's a big improvement. But when we started building eCOA in 2012, what we noticed was that we were asking our IRT for a lot of the same information so that we wouldn't have to have users re-enter it. Site lists, user lists, subjects, subject visit information, those kind of things. And just like the way many of our offerings here at Y Prime were born, we said there's got to be a better way. Managing data doesn't have to be as complicated as we're making it here. So now before we jump into unification, I wanted to mention that this idea, it's not completely new. Some of the larger companies have been selling something similar to this for quite a few years now. Though what they really have is a collection of disparate systems which are loosely coupled via integrations. And the way this usually develops is, company A produces a leading software product and things are going really well. They see company B is also doing pretty well with their product, which is in a different vertical, but could be really complementary when used alongside their own product. So company A decides they want to branch out and conquer this new vertical. The easiest way to accomplish this is to purchase company B. So company A purchases company B and now goes about building integrations between these two systems. And they repeat this a few times. So they then market their suite of their products as a suite and say, hey, come buy our suite of products and save yourself the hassle of integrating your systems and dealing with multiple vendors. Now, there are advantages to choosing a vendor with an integrated suite of products, of course. You do cut down on your list of vendors, so that's good. You theoretically eliminate some of your integration costs since these systems already have some sort of integrations in place. But let's be honest, things are still failing behind the scenes. We've already mentioned that integrations fail. So while you're not the one dealing with it because it's behind your vendor's firewall, there's still errors, which means that there's risk that your data is not in sync across your systems. So if we look at all of our clinical systems, virtually every one of them has something equivalent to a site table. They all have some sort of a patient or subject table. There's a screen in most of these systems with a create subject or a create patient button on it. In two separate systems, these tables, screens, and buttons are coded by developers twice. And so we said, why? So in our unified platform, we have a single database hosting IRT and eCOA data. No longer are we creating subjects in IRT and then integrating them with eCOA. We have one screen to add sites, and apart from adding subjects on the mobile devices in some studies, we have one screen to add subjects. There's one patient table in our unified system. You update a patient in IRT, and that data is immediately reflected in eCOA because they're both looking at the exact same ones and zeros behind the scenes. When we just look at the numbers, on average, we've been able to reduce the setup and maintenance costs for our IRT system by about 30% when we go with this unified approach. When going unified, we've been able to reduce our eCOA costs by about 10%. We're now able to do the initial system designs one time for two systems. When you add to this that by eliminating duplicate data entry or eliminating one or more integrations, we can really reduce risk. And when the study ends, we're only cleaning and delivering one set of data as well. So I hope all this sounds nice and makes sense, but why IRT and eCOA? Why do we pick these two systems? Capturing IRT and eCOA data in one system allows you real-time visibility into the data from both these domains. So it's clearly apparent in reporting, as you can imagine. Seeing your IRT and eCOA data on a single report could be useful. For example, you want to see a patient's daily diary progress side by side, as well as in between each one of their treatment visits. But how about using your eCOA data to gauge eligibility and drug compliance? This can replace what's often currently a pretty labor-intensive manual process. And then you can gain real power by configuring business rules to control your questionnaire availability and workflow based on your IRT data. You could try to implement this kind of logic via integration, but it's going to be pretty difficult. It's going to be time-consuming, expensive, and pretty prone to error. So in a unified system, the data from both systems is available to be used in decision-making in either system. And I think that's kind of a big takeaway. So at Y Prime, we're pretty passionate about integration. I spoke earlier about how much integration can bring and why it's not a good idea to have siloed systems. With integration platforms, we've even built a business around integrations at Y Prime, both making our systems play nicely with other vendors, and we're even integrating others' vendor systems for them. So we also believe strongly, however, in choosing the best system for the job. It's what we call a best-of-breed approach. So plug-and-play agnostic systems are here today. When choosing an IRT or eCOA, you need to be sure the system you choose is high quality, affordable, meets your study design needs, and can be easily integrated with the other systems. When evaluating a unified IRT eCOA system, if one of them doesn't meet your needs, then that unified system might not be right for you. You don't want to get stuck with a crappy IRT system because a vendor has a cutting-edge eCOA or vice versa. However, if both systems do meet your needs and you can gain efficiency, save money, and sleep better at night knowing your data is being used as effectively as possible, then a unified system is a great approach. Now, there are some factors you'll need to consider if you're thinking about a unified IRT eCOA. First off, you'll need some upfront design considerations across both IRT and eCOA teams. So for larger companies, it's not unusual that these are separate teams who don't typically communicate during the build process. And especially if you look at a phased release where both systems are not going live at the same time, you'll need to get both these teams on board early and be sure you prioritize what's part of each release. There are some dependencies between the systems, so you'll want to identify these early. You'll need to discuss things such as what transactions from one system could affect the other. For example, a diary entry could dictate titration. That needs to be considered by both the IRT and eCOA teams. You'll need to consider things like conflicting user roles. Your teams will need to consider cross-training about the detailed functionality. You'll want to think about what to collect and the point of origin for each data point, what transactions will impact both IRT and eCOA functions, what happens to data flow when you sync data, what can data entry trigger, and what will data corrections impact. So let's take a look at a couple case studies. Our first case study is a phase 3 inflammation study run by a large pharma company. Y Prime was chosen as the IRT and eCOA vendor both, and we provided a unified solution. This study is still running, so the final maintenance costs aren't in yet, but in the initial build phase, we saved approximately 25% off of a standalone IRT build and another approximately 10% off of a standalone eCOA implementation just by going with this unified approach. So for this study, we had a single sign-on portal system which allowed patient setup, randomization, drug dispensation, patient data review, and data corrections. In this particular study, the patients were set up when they were screened. So remember that there's only one patient table now, so no patients were ever added specifically for eCOA. The entire visit schedule was driven through the IRT system. So drug dispensing at patient visits was set up to trigger particular questionnaires on the patient devices. Whether the patient visited their doctor that day and or received treatment would determine what set of questions were available in the patient's daily diary. This single data entry point would help reduce the site burden by giving them just one URL to remember and one username password to remember. So they set up their patients one time, randomized them in the system, dispensed drug, and reviewed both the IRT and eCOA data all on the same portal. When it came time to submit DCFs or data correction forms, the site could enter a single data correction form which would make the single correction. No need to have it now corrected in IRT and updated in eCOA because they're the same now. This unified system eliminated the possibility of data not being available on the patient devices. Patients were now answering only the applicable questionnaires each day, and the data being collected was more meaningful. Case study number 2. So this was a Crohn's disease study run by a mid-sized pharma company. Again, Y Prime was selected as the vendor for both IRT and eCOA, and we provided a unified solution. Crohn's disease studies often involve pretty complex scoring algorithms and manual transcriptions of data, which often result in a lot of data corrections or DCFs. In this study, once again, the patients were set up only once in the system. By having both the IRT and eCOA data always available for eligibility calculations, we were able to streamline and automate the complex calculations. Because we reduced the need for integrations from other systems, we reduced the number of scoring DCFs to practically 0. In addition, the eCOA data was assessed after a 4-week screening period. So these diary entries would not only drive the patient stratification, but based on the results of these diary entries, and on-the-spot randomization was performed if the patient met the study criteria. If the patient did not meet the study criteria, then they were just screen failed in the system. This unified system now eliminated a process where the eCOA results will be gathered, reported to the sponsor, and then a manual decision made in the IRT system as to whether the patient was randomized or screen failed. In this case, this was all done automatically, and as soon as the eCOA diary entry was entered by the patient. Diary entry can populate the database, and then by doing so, you can reduce the level of effort and offer control for patient management, safety, and compliance. So what's next? Even more data. We'll have more studies. We'll have larger studies, more data points from these studies. The addition of mobile devices and electronic health records means the amount of data we gather is going to grow at an exponential rate. Imagine a mobile device recording a subject's activity level or the weather at their current location, their heart rate throughout the day. I mean, these are all things that you can get today on your iPhone. On a personal level. So, we're having a lot of conversations with sponsors about integrating things like that into our eCOA system. So more data like that gives us the opportunity to use this data to make better decisions. In summary, the amount of data we're capturing is increasing in volume and complexity, so why not use it? These siloed systems are bad. Integrations are good, but a unified IRT eCOA system can sometimes be a great thing. It can reduce setup and maintenance cost. It can provide your users a more streamlined and user-friendly experience. And it can provide real-time access to data, which allows you to make quicker, more informed decisions. So thank you very much for your time today. Edward, if you'd like to take control, I'd be more than happy to answer a few questions if there are any.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie, and thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Now, I would like to continue to invite our audience to send in their questions or comments using the questions window for the Q&A portion of today's webinar. I've already received some questions, Jamie, and so we'll get started with those. This first audience member asking, how did you choose to pair IRT and eCOA together?
So truth be told, we were already selling both systems independently, but it was a case of us just not doing things because that's the way they were always done. We saw an opportunity to reduce our development efforts for 2 separate systems. We could reduce the time needed to spin up these systems, and then we could get rid of the same few integrations that we were performing time and time again. Plus, we saw it as an opportunity to streamline some of the manual processes that were being performed. So, part of it was, opportunity for us, and then there was the other part, which was a way for us to see what's a better way to do things.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much for that answer. Another question for you here. This viewer asking, how do you cross-train the different functional teams? And then this audience member follows up asking, how are user roles and permissions set up?
User roles and permissions overlap within our system. So, for example, if your study coordinator role is blinded in the IRT system, it'll also be blinded in the eCOA system. So user roles and permissions, they should be determined in conjunction with both the IRT and eCOA study teams so that there aren't any discrepancies between permissions requested, in instances where both teams require the same roles. So this is best addressed, up front when we, before the SRDs are drafted, so that the client expectations are set for both groups, for both the IRT and eCOA teams. Where needed, both sponsor teams should participate in unified discussions hosted by Y Prime to talk through these user roles and then confirm the desired permissions. The first part of your question was regarding knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer for cross-functional teams usually takes place during the weekly design meetings during the build phase. And that's usually done via demos of both the IRT and eCOA systems by Y Prime. And then, excuse me, and then training would take place during investigator meetings and any other WebEx type meetings, scope for a particular project.
Right, excellent. Thank you for clarifying, Jamie. Another question for you here. Are there limitations to the type of trials suitable for a unified platform?
Any clinical trial utilizing both eCOA and IRT services would be suitable for this unified platform, regardless of therapeutic area. It shouldn't really matter the type of trial, so no.
Right. Another one for you here. How does development take place with a unified platform? And then following up, are eCOA and IRT developed concurrently?
Overlapping system requirements, might conflict between IRT and eCOA documentation. So any information which could be repeated in both SRDs is located in only one document, whichever is more applicable. So, but that's with the approval of both study teams. So the IRT and eCOA PMs review both SRDs to ensure that the requirements align. And we encourage the sponsor teams to participate in unified discussions hosted by Y Prime to approve this documentation. Regarding development timelines, we strongly recommend a unification of timelines from contract signature. So unified development and testing reduces rework. It lessens the need for CCFs post UAT and go live. So a unified testing approach is also recommended. This will streamline the development and testing process, which obviously reduces rework and avoids confusion at UAT and go live.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Jamie, for that answer. Another question here asking, what do you see as additional efficiencies through the use of a unified platform?
Good question. A pretty big one, which I mentioned already, is the single sign-on system to access IRT information, as well as PRO or PRO and ClinRO data reported via the eCOA devices. Eligibility criteria, status sharing, so your patients have the same statuses at all times in both systems. Calculations using information from both systems are also great benefits. Enforcing visit schedules on eCOA devices via data gathered in the IRT system is also pretty nice. So several efficiencies.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that detailed answer there. Another question here, is the unified eCOA IRT platform completely web-based, or does it require any specific devices?
Well, it's both. IRT and eCOA have a web component. They both have the web portal. The eCOA has the devices, of course, and those can be phones or tablets. We also do have a web diary as well, so they could be completely web-based. But of course, we do have the mobile component as well.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jamie, for those answers. We have reached the end of the question and answer portion for today's webinar. If we weren't able to attend to your question today, the team at Y Prime may try to follow up with you after the webinar. If you have any further questions, please direct them to the email address showing on your screen. That's jcook@yprime.com. Thank you, everyone, for participating in today's conference. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve our webinars. I just sent everyone a link in their chat box. You can say thanks to our speaker via LinkedIn using that message. So I encourage everyone to join us in thanking our speaker today. Jamie, thanks again for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Edward.
We hope you all found today's webinar informative. Have a great day.